Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Nature can be dangerous. The Havoc Marauder pulled out of hyperspace, coming upon a planet that they planned to spend a day or so on to recover from the previous mission. Omega looked in awe as they approached the planet's atmosphere. She could see the lush green scenery and was impressed by it, to say the least. All of the planets they had been to so far had never been so full of vegetation. "This place looks amazing," she exclaimed as Tech landed the ship. She couldn't wait to go exploring. There were so many new sights that she had only read about back on Camino. "Indeed, this is the most adequate place to lay low for a bit," Tech said. "Can I go outside?" Omega asked, not taking her eyes off the front window. Tech adjusted his goggles. "You will have to ask Hunter that." Omega turned her attention to the tattooed-faced man sitting in the co-pilot seat. "Please, Hunter, can I?" She looked at him with wide, honey-brown eyes. Hunter couldn't say no, but he also didn't like the idea of her going out and wandering around alone. "You can go." Omega jumped up and gave a mini celebration. "But you have to take Wrecker with you," he added. Omega's smile grew wider. "Okay, thank you, Hunter," she said, rushing out of the cockpit. "Her curiosity is truly amazing," Hunter chuckled to Tech as she exited. Omega nearly bumped into Echo as soon as she left the pit. "Whoa, where are you heading off to in such a rush?" He raised an eyebrow after noticing her excited facial expression. "Hunter says I'm allowed to go exploring, but only if Wrecker is with me." She glanced at the larger clone next to him. "Ha! It's not like he could have said no anyways," he boomed. "Let's go, kid, before he changes his mind." He pressed the button that opened the side door to the ship. "Be careful, Omega. Don't stray far from him," Echo warned as she set foot onto the ground. "I won't," she nodded, walking away. "And you, don't let her out of your sights," the Ark said quietly to the bulkier man beside him. "She'll be safe with me." Wrecker jumped off the ship, causing it to shake. Echo watched as the two ran into the woods, already smiling at Omega running her hand over a tree that had moss growing on the side of it. It didn't take Wrecker long to tag alongside his sister. He carefully looked around the new area, keeping to his word. Seemed safe enough. His attention was initially drawn to a vibrant display of one of nature's finest gifts. "Look over here, Omega." Wrecker knelt down next to a patch of wildflowers that were various colors. Omega tilted her head and examined them carefully. "They're so colorful," she laughed, gently picking one of them and tucking it behind Wrecker's good ear. "How do I look?" he smirked, picking a few poses to show off his new accessory. "You look pretty," the young clone giggled. She got up and ran in another direction. This part of the woods was littered with fallen trees and lots of bushes. Omega, being small, was almost swallowed up by the vegetation. Wrecker had caught up with the adventurous girl and saw her standing among multiple trees. He smiled. It brought joy to everyone in the batch, seeing Omega just being a child for once. Omega glanced around, taking in the nature. It was beautiful and unlike anything she had ever seen. She took one step further, feeling her foot sink into the ground, followed by a buzzing sound. She immediately yanked her foot up and backed away, but not before a swarm of insects engulfed her. Wrecker saw her sudden change in stance from looking around to waving her hands around wildly. "Wrecker!" Her scream echoed through the forest. Omega instantly felt like hundreds of needles were being injected into her. She brought her hands up to shield her face, which only made them a bigger target. She barely heard herself yelling for Wrecker over the loud buzzing of the flying bugs. The strong clone sprung into action, running straight for her. He could now see what she was freaking out over. The second he got to her, he scooped her up in his arms and ran, thankful he was wearing his armor. Once they were far enough, he sat her down on the soft patch of grass and looked her over. There were still some insects attached to her clothes, and some even in her hair. He wasted no time pulling them out, smushing them between his gloved fingers. "Omega," he said quietly. "It hurts," she whispered, a few tears dripping down past her chin onto the ground. Patches of red insect marks started forming on her exposed skin, no doubt causing a lot of pain to the young child. "It's okay. We'll get you back to the ship and have Tech check you out." He tried to soothe her as he picked her up, holding her close. Omega clung to his neck, occasionally letting out a few whimpers. Everywhere was throbbing and burning. Whatever species of bug attacked her, the venom was starting to take effect. Every step Wrecker took made her feel nauseous and dizzy. She just wanted to sleep, but the constant burning wouldn't let her. She was relieved when they reached the ship. As they entered, she saw fuzzy figures surround her, each of them asking loudly what had happened. But most of it was just ringing in her ears. She was set down on a cold metal surface, which felt surprisingly good. She only stirred when there was a sharp pain in her leg. Not as bad as the stings, but still painful. That was the last thing she remembered before passing out. Hunter and the others sat in the cockpit, waiting for Omega to wake up to give her more medicine. "What happened out there?" Hunter asked, his voice stern and cold. All of them looked at Wrecker for answers. "She, went a little deeper into the woods and must have stepped on a nest," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Weren't you with her?" Echo questioned. "She ran a little bit ahead of me," he said, with his head down, shame poking at his heart. "I thought I told you not to let her out of your sights." "It was only for a split second. How was I supposed to know there was a stinging bug hiding in the ground?" he shouted. That specific species of insect tends to nest in areas where plants are overgrown," Tet quipped, staring hard at his datapad. "Most likely researching said insect." "You need to be more careful, Wrecker. This is exactly why I'm so hesitant letting her out of our view," Hunter sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I'm sorry, Hunter. I really did try and protect the kid," Wrecker mumbled, keeping his eyes down. I don't doubt that, Hunter said after a moment. Who knows how much worse it could have been if you weren't with her, he said quietly, not wanting to think about it. Ted briefly looked up from his data pad and saw the slightest of movements through the crack of the door. Forrest knows who it is or how much she must have heard. It seems that we've got a silent listener. He pointed to the door. The batch whipped their heads around, Echo pressing a button that revealed a small girl standing on the other side of the door. Don't blame Wrecker, her voice came out fast. It was my fault. I should have been watching where I was going. The group instantly felt awful. We don't blame him or you, Omega. It wasn't anybody's fault, Echo said, trying to lighten her heart. If I hadn't wandered away from him, then none of it would have happened. She looked down at her feet. To be fair, the insects you encountered don't usually nest in the ground. Normally, they prefer trees to the underbrush. Tech added in a way that's to take some of her self-accusation away. I promise I'll be more careful when I go outside. Omega glanced at Wrecker, who still had a guilty expression on his face. I'll stay right next to Wrecker the whole time. Wrecker looked up at her kind, shining eyes and smiled. Come here, kid. He opened his arms wide. Omega graciously accepted, sitting on his lap as Tech rubbed more back to cream on her wounds, while Hunter and Echo took turns entertaining her with stories from the Clone Wars. By the time they'd finished, she had completely forgotten about the stings.